Jeff Chilton, I'm so delighted to welcome you back to Geological.
So happy to be here. It's just great to see you again, Michael.
Yeah, it's fun. We have this cool recording software, so we can actually see each other. But you listeners out there, well, you'll just get the delightful audio. So, Jeff, you recently were in China, weren't you? You're probably still jet lagged, aren't you?
I am a little bit. I woke up this morning at 3 o'clock, couldn't get back to sleep, got up for an hour, did a little reading, went back to bed, and got up around 7. So yeah, I am a little bit jet lagged still.
Yeah. It's a long haul across there. So you were in China. You were at a mushroom conference. I mean, you're like Mr. Mushroom in the first place. And
Yeah, so they say.
yeah, I've seen the pictures. I've got photographic
Okay.
evidence.
Well, you know what? This was a international conference of medicinal mushrooms put on by a group called the International Society for Medicinal Mushrooms. They have a conference every 2 years. And, anytime these conferences occur in China, man, I am there because that's the center of the mushroom world right now. It really is in so many different ways.
Tell us a bit about, well, I want to hear about the conference. I mean, I'm sure you've got some really great stuff to tell us about. But I'd like to first start with how is it that China's become the mushroom capital of this particular planet? And what are some of the exciting things that you're seeing as a result of so much energy being put into it there?
Well, you know what? It didn't really happen overnight, but it happened really fast. Back around the mid 70s, China's got a lot of agriculture going on, and they realized, mushrooms grow on agricultural waste materials. So the
Mhm.
government and certain individuals just started pushing this idea of let's start producing more mushrooms here. And the other part about it was that the Taiwanese, the Japanese, the Koreans were all looking at China and going, hey, let's move our mushroom production over there because we can produce everything cheaper. And
Mhm.
so in I think in 1975, China was producing maybe, let's just say 30 to 40% of the world's mushrooms, which seems like a
Back
lot,
well,
you
it
know?
does, and
It,
especially 1975?
yeah, it seems like a lot, but Michael, today China produces over 85% of the world's mushrooms. Think
Wow.
about that for this for a minute.
Wha
80 over, I mean, it is millions of tons of mushrooms, edible and medicinal. So it is like, and there are mushroom farms everywhere in China, from north to south, east to west. Every province has got them, and depending on the temperatures, because they grow most of them out of doors under ambient temperatures in shade houses.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, they it's like they have what you'd call very low tech, appropriate tech growing, and then they have some of the most advanced indoor mushroom houses you'll ever seen. I mean, I was on a farm there in China, and it was pumping out 30 tons of fresh mushrooms every week.
Wait, 30 tons?
30
Tons.
tons every
30
week. 30
tons.
tons every
How big is
week.
this farm?
Well, it was pretty big. I mean, I don't even know. I must have had 100 different grow rooms, and it was totally mechanized. But look, most of the mushroom farms in China are small. They're individual farmers. It's
Mhm.
really, I love that. It's very decentralized. This farm was
Decentralized, it sounds sustainable as well. It sounds like low tech, super low tech,
absolutely.
right? They're using organic waste from,
Yes.
farms
Yes.
and, low tech buildings for shade.
Oh, I mean, I love it because Over here, and certainly when I was a mushroom grower on a big commercial farm back in the 70s, it was very high tech, mechanized. Everything was indoor, climate controlled. But over there, everything now, for the most part, is outdoor in shade houses on shelves, and they grow it according to the temperature. So, for example, we were just
Mm.
over there. It's September. Reishi loves hot temperatures. It was reishi harvest, but shiitake, maitake, wood ear, those aren't even put out and ready to start harvesting until November when the temperatures are much cooler.
Because they like it cooler. So, what's your sense? I'm hearing that they're growing in a more. I mean, I can imagine these big grow houses and stuff on the inside, all mechanized, climate controlled, and all that. And then you've got these lower tech things where the mushrooms are actually growing more in kind of a natural environment.
Yes, yes.
Do you see a difference in constituents between, say, mechanized, super high tech, and these like outdoor, sort of closer to nature growing operations? Is there a difference in the constituent
No,
potency?
not really, because actually they're still growing on the same basic substrate, which is for the most part sawdust, enriched sawdust, because most mushrooms, with the exception of a few, sawdust is perfect for them. A lot of them are wood decomposers, so sawdust, some maybe on straw, but nutrified sawdust, like sawdust and rice bran, is a very common substrate that shiitake, maitake, wood ear, they will all grow on that same substrate with maybe a few little tweaks, but for the most part, substrate. I mean, they punch out these what I'd call a synthetic log, which is about 18 inches long, 4 to 6 inches in diameter. They just punch these out by the million, and
Mhm,
then growers will purchase X amount of them. They will crop them, harvest them, and then send them off to either a co-op or have their own market set up.
mhm, okay. So it sounds like the reishi by and large grows outdoors.
Oh yes,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely does. And the difference is today what's happening is sometimes now the shade houses will like some people have actual, you've seen greenhouses where they're all um, metal uprights and metal. Everything is metal, and then maybe they've got some kind of sheeting over the metal greenhouses that is a little more than just plastic sheeting. They're moving in some cases to that type of system, but a lot of these houses, no, they're just standard metal frame with plastic, just a standard hoop type greenhouse, very low tech. And what happens with reishi too is they will actually move their cropping location with the smaller farms every 2 years, because what happens is when you're burying this wood in the ground, which is what they're doing to grow reishi, they bury logs in the ground.
Mhm,
As that decomposes, there will be competitors that will start to move in. So after the second year, the ground there can be, could be a little bit contaminated either by bugs or molds. And so you'll just move it off, and you'll come in and grow something else in that same space. Well, you move the reishi house to another location.
right. Maybe let life fallow for a period of time and then
Yes, that
back
too.
again.
That too. And this reishi farm that we visited this time around, and we visited last year too, was at the end of the road, back into the mountains. And have you ever been to Zhejiang province?
Zhejiang, yeah.
I tell you, Michael, that is so beautiful. The farmland that they've got there, and as you get west in there, these beautiful hills and sort of high rolling mountains, and it's just a beautiful province, and so much agriculture. It's a rich province because of all of that.
Yeah, and they've had trade too for a long time.
Absolutely, yeah, with Hangzhou right there, and then of course Shanghai as well. So
Right.
yeah, it's a hub, and a lot going on there. But listen, this there's some really cool stuff that came out of this conference, and it was attended by maybe 500 three to 500 scientists from around the world. And the thing with China and why it's so much the center of the mushroom universe is that they have maybe 15, 20 different mycological field stations around China, which is where they've got scientists that are working on different types of mushroom growing problems, or how to increase the yields, or how to bring new mushrooms into cultivation. So they've got lots of scientists, they've got lots of small growers. In the United States, there are two scientists in the United States dedicated to the mushroom industry.
That's it?
Two at Penn State University. That's it.
Wow.
And we're talking pretty much like cultivation type
Mhm.
issues, right? Two scientists at Penn State University.
Why do you suppose this is the case? Is it because we don't have much of a sophisticated mushroom growing, environment here, or is it just super hot in China? What's your sense of why it's like this?
A couple things. The Penn State University, which was the where they have these two scientists. There have been times like 30 years ago when I first was getting into it. It was there. They had maybe half a dozen, 10 different scientists at Penn State. But in Pennsylvania, that's the center of agaricus production in the United States. So there was lots of money there to support Penn State and their scientists there to do research into the production of agaricus. And agaricus production now has pretty much peaked out. It's maxed out. They are doing really well in terms of producing that mushroom. So the staff at Penn State has just shrunk, and it hasn't it hasn't come back with looking at shiitake production, even though they've done research on that, or some of these others, maitake and so on. It hasn't kept pace. Whereas, so although we do grow some of those other mushrooms here, in China, they grow 12 to 16 different edibles that you can find in the marketplace. Here, we might find six if you're in the right location, maybe a metropolitan area, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, probably in some other areas. But
Yeah, not so much. Well, I'm super curious to hear more about this conference that you were at, because I know that you were excited about going, and I'm curious to know, what's the buzz in the mushroom world these days? What's the stuff that's on the leading edge?
well, you know what? There's some really cool things. For me, a lot of times it's what new species can you produce, and you know let me just tell you a little bit about some of the information that I found there, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about cordyceps, because there's some really exciting cordyceps stuff that came
Well,
out
the
of
main
there.
reason that I know we're on the horn today is because I did wanna talk to you about cordyceps, so we'll save that for a little later.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to talk about there, but just in terms of China, someone did a talk on fungal resources in China. Okay, they've identified 25,000 different species of mushroom. Of those, 1,800 are edible, 800 are medicinal. So they're really identifying a lot of these species. And the Chinese Materia Medica
Mhm.
in 1999 listed 144 different now types, they say, of mycomedicine. Okay, and that would mean to me more than just a single species, but maybe combinations, formulas, or something like that. And in fact, it also said historically that they had discovered 800 kinds of mycomedicine, which I hadn't really heard of before, because that was like, wow, that's really a lot. And again, meaning there was some kind of fungal mushroom species put into some of these different formulas. And maybe it was the same species put into multiple formulas, much like Poriococcus goes into a lot of different
Mhm.
formulations.
Oh, yeah, fooling is in all kinds of
Exactly.
stuff.
So when they say 800 kinds of mycomedicine, I think, it could be, from who knows, 20 different mushrooms or 30 different mushrooms. But it said 14 kinds of fungal medicines were reported before the Han Dynasty, which was 200 BCE to 250 CE. So 14 kinds of fungal medicines, and it said cordyceps was first recorded about 2,000 years ago, which is kind of interesting to me because other people say, oh, it was really first recorded in 1800s or 1700s or something like that. But in this case, this person that was doing the presentation said 2,000 years ago. So that just sort of gives you a little bit of an idea of, well, yeah, they've been using fungi in TCM for a long time.
Yes. Well, I think most of the folks listening here today were familiar with the fooling, we're familiar with the juuling, the reishi, the linger. It's pretty much part and parcel of the work that we do. I'm curious to know about, and I've heard you say is that there's new mushrooms that are being discovered, and of course, I'm interested in the medicinal side of it. Was there anything at this conference that came up around newer strains or just other ways of using the mushrooms that we're used to working with?
Well, a lot of the research, and they divided it up into different segments. So there was definitely a pharmacological part of the conference. And so we've got researchers out there that are constantly looking at the chemical makeup and looking at, for example, someone did a study on reishi where he measured the triterpenes in 6 different stages. So he measured it from the reishi when it first appeared, like, and maybe just the stem, and it was maybe 4 inches tall, and then through about 6 different developmental stages. And to me, I like that kind of stuff because then as somebody who's like, okay, I'd like to get the most out of this reishi mushroom medicine wise, what would be the best time to harvest? Well, unfortunately, in his research, which was contrary to other research that I've seen, he said, well, the highest level is right there when it's first coming up. Well, that doesn't help you much if you're on a reishi farm, and that means that you snip it off when maybe the weight of that's going to be 10% of what a mature mushroom would have. But what's kind of interesting about that is that on a reishi farm, when they start to come up off that log, they are actually snipping off some of those early rising stems of reishi mushrooms because all they want is one mushroom per log. So what that means is you could go, well, look, take those and pull them aside and let's make a special medicine out of those.
Right, because they'd maybe higher, what'd you say? They were higher in,
Higher in
triterpene?
triterpenes.
Yeah.
And it's just funny that, I mean, the other side of the whole triterpene thing is that it's very dependent on the particular strain or what we would call the cultivar. So let's just say a reishi from different parts of China, even though it's the same species, just growing from a different part, it'd have a different genotype. And so then it may produce more of these compounds, and that's what you're looking for, just like certain plants would, growing from different parts of the world would have different constituents in them, or higher or lower. And if you're looking at it medicinally, you're thinking, well, that's really what I want to be planting, not some cultivar that produces low amounts.
Well, and I know with Chinese medicine, there are certain herbs from particular locations, and it's like, "Oh, yeah, if you want the best peony, you go to this one particular place,"
Exactly.
right? Because yeah, because of the local environment and what's in the soil and the temperature and, who knows what
Yeah,
else.
yeah.
I wanna come back to triterpenes for a moment. I can even hardly pronounce it. Uh, Biologically, what do those do? Why would somebody wanna be eating a reishi mushroom that has that in it?
Well, the triterpenes, most of the research points to them being used by the liver, and whether it's purification, helping in purification, or just um, promoting the function of the liver. That's what I see as one of the major functions of the triterpenes. And I even had a TCM practitioner in a Ganoderma conference tell me that that was his main herb for the liver. And
Hmm.
he used as much as 30 grams of dried reishi as sort of his high limit for people with liver disease. So when for me, I look at it as kind of that's the place we should look at. If you have liver issues, then reishi triterpenes would be, and reishi would be what you'd be looking for.
Okay. Any other mushrooms? I mean, we're going to get to cordyceps here in a moment, the main course, but any other mushrooms that got your attention while you were here at this
A
conference?
couple did, one of which is morels, which is a major edible,
Delicious. Those are
and
delicious.
and see this is what happens, Michael, when you have like hundreds, thousands of mushroom scientists in your country. They've been working on cultivating morels now for 10, 15 years over there, and they finally figured it out. And outdoor cultivation, even indoor cultivation to some degree, somebody actually in the United States had a patent on morel cultivation that he published in 1984, and it was indoor method, and he sort of figured out what was going on. But only one mushroom farm ever came out of that, and it stopped production 10 years ago because it just couldn't make it commercially. But in China now, they have outdoor cultivation where you can see rows outside in the soil with thousands of morels in each one of these rows, and they're producing morels, hundreds, thousands of tons of fresh morels.
So you don't have to like go out in the woods to the secret morel place anymore.
Well, you still might want to do that, but no, because it's fun. But what that means is that morels will be something that you can actually cultivate and grow. And in a way, I like mushroom cultivation because one, wildcrafting always leads to tears somehow because people want to go out and they end up over harvesting everything. Mushrooms are a little bit different, but there's an example of this where truffles in Europe, the truffle, which is a very expensive, it grows underground. It's a sclerotia. It's a pure mycelial mass, and it's got a really pungent, strong odor and flavor, which is why people love it. Its production peaked in the 1890s because at that time it was being wildcrafted and it was valuable, and they over harvested it. And the other side of it was, since then, a lot of the forest that was growing in ended up being cut down, and housing developments and you name it. And
Hmm.
it went
So the
really
habitat went away.
well. Yeah, it went really downhill until it finally plateaued after they learned how to inoculate the roots of oak trees, and then they started planting oak plantations with it at in the roots. And once those started producing, it sort of normalized production, but at a much lower level, like I think 9 tons compared to the peak at some point in the 1980s or the 1890s of 180 tons.
Wow.
Wow, I know.
Way more common back then.
Yes, absolutely. So very, very different. And so that's the problem with wildcrafting. The other mushroom that they're doing now is a mushroom called the cauliflower mushroom. Oh man, Michael, when we find a cauliflower mushroom, it is time to rejoice. It's like, it really is just a beautiful fungus, all flowery, and it tastes got a kind of a crunchy texture, tastes kind of like nice noodles that, you put stuff on. I mean, it's really a great mushroom. They're cultivating it now. And, and again, that to me is just, as a mushroom grower by trade, I just love it when they bring new mushrooms into cultivation. And the other one, of course, that we're going to talk about is the cultivation of cordyceps. And now, oh my goodness. And let me just jump around a little bit since we're kind of talking about that. I went to a presentation by a man who showed photos of cultivating 91 different species of cordyceps.
91.
91 different species of cordyceps. And let me tell you, now, first of all, we are now able to cultivate Cordyceps militaris, which is what I sell in my business because I just think it's a fabulous stand-in for Cordyceps sinensis, and maybe even better. And I just love Cordyceps militaris. It's wonderful. The fact that we can cultivate it now in large quantities means means that it's much less expensive. You're getting so much more. And as far as I'm concerned, the profile, the chemical profile is just as good, if not better. But think about this for a minute. This man has gone out and he's collected in China and in other parts of the world at least these 91 different species. I think maybe he's gotten his culture bank up to 200 species maybe, but 91 of them he was able to actually get the mycelium, grow it out, and grow the mushroom. And the
And
pictures
actually get the
were
fruiting bodies.
amazing. That's correct. Absolutely. I mean, and in some cases, not just one or two or something like that, which 20 years ago it was like with Cordyceps militaris, people would grow it and you get one or two little fruiting bodies, and you're like, okay, this is great. Now, when are we going to really get rolling? Well, he had some plates of it that were just wall to wall of these amazing looking cordyceps species, which, cordyceps is amazing as it is. But when you see the different types of cordyceps, different colors, different branchings, um, just incredible.
It just drives a mycologist crazy, doesn't it?
well, and remember this too is like they haven't even started to get into the pharmacology of these species, because some of them could have a very distinctive pharmacology and be producing compounds that are unknown or have other benefits, and ultimately we could have one of those come into the marketplace and be there.
Well, we already know that cordyceps is a powerful and super useful medicinal mushroom. Can you tell us a little bit about the difference between the cyanescens and the militaris?
Sure. And let me do a little something here too, because I think what I'd love to do is just talk a little bit about how it grows, so
Mm.
everybody knows what's going on here.
Now, are
Because
you talking about
cord,
in nature or in a laboratory?
yes,
In
in
nature.
nature, in nature,
It's a
yeah,
horror
yeah,
story.
because well, depending,
Depending on what
it's
side you're on,
nature.
it's nature.
Yeah, Michael, it's nature. Everybody eats everybody. Come on. So it's a ghost moth. Okay, there is a ghost moth, and this ghost moth, it is in the spring and fall. It is kind of, you see it out in the fields and it's fluttering away, and it's mating, and then it will lay its eggs in these fields. So it's out in the pastures there, and it's laying its eggs, and the eggs will be 600 to 1200 eggs, uh, a single moth can lay out there in the grass. Now, these eggs will, I guess, kind of percolate down into the deep grass, and then at some point they will hatch and turn into a larva. And this is what's really cool. I was actually just reading about this today. They will kind of burrow down into the ground and now they're down underneath. And what are they doing? They're feeding on the roots of these plants, of the grasses. And so they're out in the pasture feeding on the roots of these grasses, and it takes up to 2 years for these, and they're caterpillars under the ground, for them to fully mature to where they might get ready to hibernate and pupate and all of that. Well, at a certain point, they get there, they hibernate as a caterpillar, thinking they're going to pupate. But actually, while they have been rooting around, they have picked up spores of cordyceps, which are hanging out on them. And when they go to sleep and hibernate, these spores will germinate and move right in under the skin and start to consume them.
So this is interesting. The spores wait until the caterpillar is going through that pupation stage. It's phase changing from one form to another, and that's when it goes to work. Wow.
Yes, that's right. And this is happening while you've got some of them down under there hibernating. You've got the ones a year earlier that are there too, and I guess I would assume they must be hibernating too, and then they wake up and they continue their feeding frenzy. But but so they're colonizing this and they consume the whole insides of the caterpillar. If you were to find that caterpillar, it looked like a
Right.
caterpillar.
Well, I mean, anyone who's been to China has seen them in the herb stores.
Yeah, yeah, and the whole inside is nothing but mycelium. And what happens is not just mycelium, a hardened mass. It is like a sclerotia. So when you think of a poria, which is this hardened mass of mycelia, that's what's happening inside that caterpillar is this hardened mass of mycelia, and then that year, instead of waking up, springtime, summer warms up a little bit, up comes the cordyceps fruiting body right off the head. I don't know if you've noticed closely, but it grows off the head of the caterpillar. So right off the head, and it comes up into the grass. And what they call it is winter worm, summer grass. In the Tibetans call it Yartsagunbu and Dong Chong Chow Kao. Is that how the Chinese
Dong
pronounce
chong cha cao.
Chow? Okay, so
Dong chong
so
cha cao.
winter worm, the caterpillar, summer grass, and what happens now at that point is people go out into the pastures. They literally get down on their hands and knees and they crawl around all day, combing through the grasses of those pastures, looking
Yeah,
for
because this
these
stuff
things.
is so valuable.
It's terribly valuable. I mean,
Super valuable, super helpful to people in their
well,
health.
and what's interesting is when they find it. I mean, if we go out looking for a mushroom, we find the mushroom, we don't dig down and harvest what's under the ground, which would be the mycelial network. But in this case, people will dig down and bring back the earth there, and they will very gently take that caterpillar out, harvesting it caterpillar fruiting body and all. And that one caterpillar fungus is going to be worth probably a minimum of 10 US dollars
For one bug.
for one bug. And listen, right now the price for a kilo of dried caterpillar
Mhm.
fungus is somewhere around, and I hear different numbers, but somewhere around 20,000 US.
Now, I've got a question about the part that's inside the bug body, the hardened mass of mycelial material. Is it different biochemically than the, fruiting body that comes out the head?
Well, interestingly enough, scientists that has gone ahead and analyzed both basically says that they're very similar in chemical makeup. Yeah, very similar in chemical makeup. And a lot of the, here's the other thing about cordyceps is they don't have that magic compound that we're all thinking, okay, what is it that gives it its effect? Cordyceps, they haven't really found that. Instead, they give you a whole range of nucleosides, adenosine and uridine and uracil and all these nucleosides and nucleotides, but they use that sometimes as a sort of identity key for let's just say the quality. But the fact is those are found in all mushrooms. So it's a really lousy way to do that. Just like they will say, okay, they used to say cordycepic acid. We're looking for cordycepic acid. It actually is mannitol. All mushrooms have mannitol. Not good. Um, so what can we use? Well, if it's Cordyceps militaris, one of those actual nucleosides is called cordycepin. And cordycepin, interestingly enough, occurs in Cordyceps militaris, but not in the wild-crafted caterpillar fungus, which is one way that you can figure out whether what you've got, if somebody's showing you just a brown powder and saying this is
Hmm.
cordyceps, one of the ways of figuring out, okay, this is not actually Cordyceps sinensis, which is the wildcrafted one, and if cordycepin shows up, you could say, well, this must be
Must be
Cordyceps
militaris. So
militaris.
the actual active ingredients that let cordyceps do its thing for healing purposes, nobody knows what it is.
That's correct. And what's interesting is that
That's really interesting.
a lot of the research actually has been focused on the beta glucans in cordyceps, and it has shown that they are actually one of the major active components of cordyceps, like most other medicinal mushrooms, because they have antifungal, antibacterial properties, immunological properties. So that's the other thing that they have shown. Now, here's a few other just kind of cool things, and they estimate that there's only 150 tons of wild-crafted cordyceps that they harvest. 150 tons.
That sounds like a lot.
Well, it's not actually a lot. That's interesting. 150 tons. You go, wow. Well, that seems like a lot of stuff. But the fact is that Cordyceps militaris right now they are growing close to 12,000 tons.
Wow.
12,000 versus
Okay.
150. Now, here is the other thing that came out of this conference that is really, really cool. Are you ready? Are you
I'm
sitting
sitting
down?
down. I'm buckled up.
Buckle up, buddy. We're going for a ride. They have actually figured out how to grow Cordyceps sinensis, the caterpillar fungus. They can grow it now, and there was somebody at the conference that presented a paper on that and slides. And how do they do it? Well, the first thing they do is they learn how to grow the ghost moth.
So they're growing the ghost moth, and then they're inoculating the bug.
Yes, that's right. And then they're putting,
Nature is a bitch.
and then they,
Oh,
and then they're putting that caterpillar that and now is kind of like getting all fuzzy with mycelium into kind of a earth type environment, and up comes the cordyceps. They've actually done it, and what did they produce? Let's just see, because I've got the number. They produced in 2016 10 tons 10 tons of caterpillar fungus they grew artificially
the actual cyanescence.
of Cordyceps sinensis.
It's like the holy grail of cordyceps.
Absolutely right. That's like, man, the person that's holding that secret, if you're figuring that he can sell those for $20,000 a kilo, ooh, that's a lot of money that he's getting for that. And he showed these slides. It was really interesting growing this ghost moth. I mean, they are incubating the eggs. I don't know how they're milking these moths for their eggs, but they're incubating the eggs, and you can see the larvae start to grow out in the different stages until they're a caterpillar. And then they're getting inoculated, and then they're incubating these caterpillars, and the caterpillars have a nice life in some nice little grass-like environment. I'm not sure, it didn't show that, but then ultimately they put it to sleep, and I mean, they've got secrets they're not going to tell us about, obviously, but they are doing this now. It's absolutely confirmed. I
Oh,
know a scientist who's been working with
wow, they
them.
cracked the code on it. So we've got cyanensins, we got militaris, we got, was it CS4? That's another one. How are these things different from each other?
Well, let's talk about CS4 for a second, because CS4 is really cool, and CS4 they're
Hey,
producing.
Jeff, is there any mushroom that you don't think is cool?
No, probably not. They're all very cool. It's funny, Michael, because I just read an article that someone passed on to me this morning about this unbelievably beautiful orange. It wasn't even mushroom like, but it was a fungus that was growing. Where did they find it? But it's the only mushroom they've ever discovered, the only actual fruit body of this fungus they've ever discovered that is poisonous, and that poison will go through your skin.
Ooh,
Yeah, because you can pick a poisonous mushroom, and you can handle it. It's not going to go through your
except for
skin.
this
You got to
stuff.
consume it, except for this thing, and it has killed a couple of people. I mean, so one of the groups that it killed were they ate it, but you can actually get the toxin will actually go through your skin.
Holy smokes.
I know, I know. I'll send you a picture so you can avoid it.
I'll avoid it. But tell us, yeah, tell us about CS4.
CS4. I mean, it's a really interesting story because in 1989, when I went to China for the first time, I went to a mushroom conference,
Oddly enough.
oddly enough, and there was a somebody there was giving a presentation on CS4, and during the conference they contacted me and they said, "Hey, we've got this cordyceps, and we've done all the tests on it." They gave me a little book that had all of the different tests that they'd run on it, all the different certifications they'd gotten from the government. And what CS4 is, for those who I'm jumping ahead of here, CS4 is scientists will go out, they'll get the caterpillar fungus, they'll take it back to their lab, they will take a little piece of the mycelium that's growing in there, they'll put it in a petri plate, the mycelium will grow out. They've got a culture now of the
Mhm.
fungus, and that culture allows them to grow it normally. Just like if I take a regular mushroom, open it up, take a little piece of its flesh, put it in a petri plate, grow it out, I've got an exact clone of that mushroom. I can now grow that mushroom if it's amenable.
Can you grow it to the fruiting stage, or you're just growing mycelia?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, generally, and this is what's interesting about CS4. And with CS4, what they did is they took it and they grew it in a fermentation tank. And a fermentation tank is a very, very large tank of liquid. And if you put that mycelium, and this is all done, it's all
Mhm.
sterile medium, and it's a sterile piece that they're inoculating with, and the mycelium will grow out. You aerate this liquid and you stir it, and the mycelium will just proliferate in there. And then at the end of the process, they will take the fluid away, and they've got a mass of mycelium, which then they harvest, dry out. They've done all the tests on, and ultimately they sell it at CS4. Or in this case, I think the original CS4 was Jinshu Bao. Is that
I'm not
right?
sure.
Have you heard that name? Okay, and so right there in the 1980s, and the reason they did this was because, well, cordyceps is very
Right?
expensive. So they're like, can't we grow it some way? Well, here's what's interesting is that normally if I bring that piece of mycelium from whatever mushroom and I put it in a plate, I grow it out, I can maybe grow it out. Let's say it's a wood decomposer. I grow it out on sawdust and I'll get a mushroom to come up off that
Right.
sawdust.
You get the fruiting body
Yes, the fruiting bar. So here's the key. The key is then I know for certain that that mycelium that I've gotten is indeed the actual mushroom that I think I've got.
because you can see its fruiting body and identify it.
Exactly.
Oh, so now this gets a little tricky in these big vats, right? What do we really have in here?
Well, and the thing is that nobody could actually produce that fruiting body from any of these cordyceps cultures because scientists were getting all sorts of different cultures from these caterpillar fungi. But nobody could, oh, well, I shouldn't say nobody. In 1999, a scientist, a woman scientist at the Academy of Sciences in Beijing, she was a mycologist, she actually fruited one cordyceps, one what was a true Cordyceps sinensis. She did it, and it was like, wow, somebody's finally did it.
Was it readily reproducible?
Well, I don't think it was. And I met this woman and spoke with her because I was like, wow, this is
Yeah,
fantastic. I want to know more
of
about it.
course.
And I met her but the fact is that even though she could reproduce it, which at least validated the culture she
Mhm.
had, it still wasn't such that she could produce a lot of these things so that it didn't have any sort of value in terms of great, now we can produce it and have access to it other than wildcraft it. And the funny thing is, Michael, is that years later some of the other Chinese scientists were going, yeah, did she really do it, or was that planted in
Well,
there?
it's one of the questions that I think often and for good reason gets asked in China.
Well, it does, but I mean, look, not just China. Let's be clear. That happens everywhere. When you've got something valuable, adulteration will happen anywhere. Yeah, I
Fair
mean,
enough. True.
I don't know about you, but as a child of the 60s, let me tell you, there was so much bogus crap out there that they were ripping people off, calling it one thing or the other, calling it magic mushrooms. People actually, at one point, they would chop up agaricus mushrooms and they would lace it with LSD, and then they'd have it in a little baggie, and they would, sort of like it'd be in the freezer or something, and then they pull it out and they try to sell you that as psilocybin mushrooms. And it's like, really? That's how. I mean, look, it happens
Sure.
everywhere. Um, but anyway, that's the CS4, and the CS4 is a very famous product. They produce it, thousands of tons of it, and not just this one factory that developed the process, but small factories all over China produce this stuff and sell it, and it's cheap, very cheap. Some people swear by it. Others, like myself, I'm not so certain about it. And I've seen the quality that some people call CS4. The quality of it is just no, absolutely, this is not what you say it is. And here's the other interesting thing. When I was at a conference on adulteration a few years back, a woman there was giving a talk on DNA analysis because that was her
Mhm.
thing. And she said, and as an example, she said she gave us a couple of examples of the different natural products that she had tested. Oh, and we did test cordyceps, and we had dozens and dozens of samples sent into us of that were supposed to be cordyceps sinensis, and only one out of the dozens of samples was true Cordyceps sinensis. And unfortunately, The CS4 may or may not be true Cordyceps sinensis. We don't really know.
Well, is there a DNA fingerprint that would match up between these things?
Well, here's what's kind of interesting is the CS4 and the mycelium type cordyceps, what they used to be able to do was they weren't, you couldn't really call it Cordyceps sinensis because that's what's called a teleomorph. And the teleomorph is the fruiting
Hmm.
body. The anamorph is the mycelium body. So they had two names. And so there were multiple different anamorph names for these mycelia products of cordyceps. And in fact, that one was called Bacillomyces hepiale. And there was others called Hirsutellus sinensis and multiple names. They have since just recently gone, sorry, we're not going to allow that anymore. So in 2014, they just basically said, sorry, that there's only one name, and that was actually, it was interesting. It was called the Amsterdam Declaration. One fungus, one name. Sorry, teleomorphs are out. One fungus, one name. Too much confusion here. You can't have a name for the mycelium and then a different name for the mushrooms. Sorry. So, but you know, with all I've sold CS4 for years. We stopped selling it about 3 years ago, but when we now got the actual fruiting bodies, the actual mushrooms of Cordyceps
Right. So
militaris.
tell us about that one. How are you getting fruiting body out of this particular strain? Is it because it's a different kind of mushroom? It's a different kind of mycelium. I mean, it's in the Cordyceps family. How is it that you're growing this into those gorgeous fruiting bodies? I've seen pictures.
Have you ever seen the pictures of Cordyceps militaris?
They're groovy, man.
Oh God, orange, Michael, bright orange. It's just
It's a
amazing.
little psychedelic looking.
It is so cool. Even the mycelium is orange. Anyway, Cordyceps militaris was easier to culture because it was more of a warm temperature species. That was one of the issues
Mm.
with trying to culture Cordyceps sinensis because that grew up at 3 to 4,000 meters. We're
It was
talking
high.
10 to 14,000
Mhm.
feet. Grew up in the really cold areas up in Tibet and those places. So it did not like being cultured at all. And so that was one of the issues always with it. But with militaris, you could actually take that, you could put it into a petri plate, a little piece of it. It would grow out. If it was orange, you were looking good. And then they learned very slowly how to get it to fruit. And they did. And then they finally figured out the formula of what was the substrate that it needed to grow on. And remember, this is the other thing about cordyceps. That I just read this today. It said in nature there are more than 1,000 known fungal species capable of killing insects. Oh, aren't they wonderful? Helping us out.
Wow. So we could use fungus as an insecticide.
Yes. And I mean, I don't, some people have are trying to make that happen. They really haven't yet. But most of these fungi that will kill insects are cordyceps species. So, so anyway, Cordyceps militaris. Now they finally found the key to it and found the right medium to grow it on. It grows in warmer temperatures, which is
Mhm.
great. Most mushrooms, when we cultivate them, they like the temperature to be right around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. That's kind of the perfect temperature for most mushrooms. I mean, there's a broad range, but the majority, they will thrive at that
Mhm.
temperature. Cordyceps militaris, I mean, when we grow it on the farms where we get it, it is like a wall to wall orange little fruiting bodies. It is a beautiful sight and it is the real thing. Why would I want this anamorph, this mycelia? mycelium product from fermentation when in fact I can get the real thing with Cordyceps militaris. And part of it was that over the years we would test these products. We had ways to test them, and the quality of these fermentation products was just all over the map. We could never see anything consistent, and the consistent ones that we did see were actually very low in beta glucans. They just not had whereas the cordyceps like around 10%. Cordyceps militaris is 25% beta
Hmm.
glucans.
And again, we're not exactly sure what the active ingredient is in this, but beta glucans tend to be indicative of some kind of bioactivity. Is that correct?
Yes, and the other thing that we do, and this is what I presented at the conference, Michael, is I presented my method for basically producing a fingerprint for every mushroom species that we use. And that fingerprint is based on beta glucan, it's based on ergosterol, which is the fungal sterol, and all fungi have it. And so there is a level of ergosterol that product should have to that you can use for identity purposes. So in other words, if you were to get a fungal product, and remember what a lot of companies have to deal with is somebody selling them a brown powder.
Right.
I mean, can you imagine you're off to China? I mean, even with, if you're going there and you're seeing these different medicines where you have to just take it on faith if it's not in its actual herbal form. But for all of these different mushroom products, for the most part, somebody that wants to buy them, they're looking for a powder because that's what they sell as supplements. So as I'm traveling through China in the 90s, people are wanting to sell me their mushroom products, and they're just showing me this brown powder and saying, "Hey, would you like to buy my shiitake extract,
Uh,
maitake extract, whatever extract?" I'm just looking at it going, "What do I? How do I know what that is? It's just a brown
you're a child of the 60s. You know about checking these things out.
yeah, I'm no fool. I've been there before. So we test for beta glucan, we test for ergosterol, and we test for a very cool new compound. I don't know if you've heard about it before. It's called ergothioneine.
No, I've never heard. I haven't even heard of ergosterol. No.
Ergothioneine is a protein-like compound that we have in our bodies at all of these different stations in our body. They believe it is a antioxidant of some sort, but they believe it's got some function which they haven't fully figured out yet. But as we get older, it tends to go
Mm.
down. And so they are thinking it definitely plays a role in longevity. Fungi are some of the few organisms that actually produce ergothioneine in large quantities because we don't produce it,
This is
but
interesting.
yet it's there.
So, I mean, mushrooms have long, I mean, especially like Linger reishi, long have been associated with longevity.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, and I, you know what? The first thing I tell people, when I'm talking to them and stuff, when we're talking mushrooms, I say, look, are you eating mushrooms? If you're not eating mushrooms, put them into your diet. They're a great food. They're loaded with these beta glucans, and you'll get them by eating mushrooms too. I mean, they're kind of like a missing link in a way. They're not a plant, they're not an animal. They sit right in between. They have some attributes similar to us. They don't produce starch, which is really interesting. Instead, they produce glycogen as their storage carbohydrate,
Like
like
we
we
do.
do. We produce
Mhm.
glycogen as our storage carbohydrate. So do mushrooms.
That's kinda weird.
Isn't it interesting? And I'm told, I've read where we supposedly share a greater amount of DNA. It's much more similar to fungi than it is to plants. Or so I don't know what that means. It may mean nothing, but it's just kind of interesting that we share certain attributes with these things. And don't you dare call me a mushroom head, okay?
We already know you are.
So ergothioneine. So I have four different compounds that I can utilize for quality control. That's what I presented to the conference, and it was very well received. That this is a fingerprint that you can use for quality control, and that would be beta glucans, ergosterol, ergothioneine, and the fourth one is, in fact, alpha glucan. And alpha glucan are the starches. Mushrooms don't have starch, but we test for alpha glucan, which means that if there's a lot of starch in this brown powder, you are giving me something that is either chock full of carriers, or I think, as we talked in the last one, it's that myceliated
Hmm.
grain that is being grown in the United States. So those four are a way for any company to institute a quality control program. And that's what we use for all of our products. And it is just so solid. It is just, I'm so happy to have this because quality control. I mean, we used to measure, like 10 years ago, we used to measure polysaccharides. Well, then it turned out that polysaccharides are starches too.
Right. I remember having this conversation with you, what, a year and a half ago when we first had you on the podcast? Yeah. So polysaccharides is really it's useless.
It's useless. Beta glucans are polysaccharides. And so people think, oh, yeah, if we got a lot of polysaccharides, that means we have a lot of beta glucans. No, no, it doesn't. Because most of those polysaccharides could, in fact, be nothing more than starch. And what I found out was that a few companies that I knew and had bought some products from were putting a lot of starches in. And, look, herbal extracts will sometimes come on a starch
Mhm.
carrier just to because it's necessary to kind of, keep it stable.
Anybody using granulated herbs knows this because that's how granulated herbs works.
That's right. And with granulated herbs, you've got to be careful that the starch level is not too high because it can be. But generally speaking, for I would say if there's 10 or 12 or something like that percent in there, okay, that's fine. But we don't make our extracts with carriers. We keep the carriers out of them because I just think if I can deliver the pure extract to people, then that's better. They know they're getting 100% of what they
What they're
think they're
looking to get.
getting.
Hey, could we go back for a moment to these alpha glucans? Tell me more about these. It's the first time I've heard of an alpha glucan.
Well, it's like we have beta glucans, and then there's also glucans that are alpha. And these alpha glucans are very different from the beta glucans are, again, what are the immunologically active. Even your cereal grains will have beta glucans, and you've probably heard of like oats. It's got beta glucans, and so that's good for us and things like that.
Actually, I heard something really interesting. I had a patient the other day. You know how it is in an acupuncture clinic. People bring in all kinds of stuff. Oh, I saw this practitioner and they gave me this because it's supposed to help my whatever, blah, blah, blah. And it was a jar of, it said beta glucan on it. And I didn't know that people were taking, I'm using air quotes here, beta glucans as supplements. And I'm thinking, is that a mushroom product? Because, I've heard you talk about beta glucans as part of, checking uh, the quality of a mushroom product. But are there are there actually supplements out there, to your knowledge, where it's just beta glucans and people are just taking it because it's immunologically supposed to be helpful?
Yes, yes, there are, and where those beta glucans come from actually are yeast.
Mm.
So brewer's yeast, baker's yeast has beta glucans, and they have the similar structure. This yeast has a similar structure. It's a beta 1316. The oat is a beta 1314, which is not nearly as active. In fact, very low activity with that grain beta glucan. Instead, the grain is really chock full of these alpha glucans. And look, yeast beta glucans do have activity. I've seen studies on them. They look pretty good. That's what people would be getting if they're buying one of these beta glucans, just straight beta glucan products. And how good is it? I don't really know for sure. I haven't looked at it.
Now you're probably eating mushrooms knowing you.
I know brewer's yeast. Well, yeah, I used to get it on my popcorn occasionally, but yeah, I haven't don't do a lot of popcorn these days. I mean, I don't want to knock it because it could be good.
Hmm.
Again, I've seen studies; it's active and all. In fact, the test that we use, this is interesting. The test that we use, Michael, is it measures fungal beta glucans and the alpha glucans, and we had a in our testing, we sometimes test other products because we like to know what other brands are using, and even products from China. We love to test products from
Hmm.
China. We tested somebody's product that was a chaga product, and a chaga should have around 10% beta, very low beta glucan, 10% beta glucan, because it's a canker. It's not even a real fungus. It's a canker. It's got some mycelium, but it's very different. 10% beta glucan. Okay, we tested this chaga product. It was 57% beta glucan.
What?
Okay,
Something's up, right?
red flag. Up goes the red flag, and we're going like, okay, well, what are we going to do about that? I went, look, let's send it off for DNA analysis. Let's just see what's going on in this product. Send it off for DNA analysis, and what did it contain? There was not a single sequence in this product for chaga. Not a single DNA sequence for chaga. What and we also knew, okay, they could be putting yeast in there, so let's have them test for yeast. They tested for yeast. Yes, there were sequences for brewer's yeast. Okay, there were also sequences in there, a ton of sequences actually, like up to 10,000, 12,000 sequences for buckwheat.
Huh.
Buckwheat. And now I'm going, and when you get these analysis, they say, look, the number of sequences, that doesn't really mean anything. The key thing is if the sequences are there, because sometimes the sequences get destroyed and things like this. Well, I don't think the chaga sequences are necessarily going to get destroyed. And the fact that you've got yeast sequences in there means to me that this was probably, and it wasn't because they thought, oh, we'll boost up the beta glucans of this chaga product. I think it was just a straight matter of pure
Hmm.
adulteration. They just took brewer's yeast, they mixed in some buckwheat, and then they sold it to this unsuspecting customer as chaga.
So I want to ask you about chaga because it's kind of a popular mushroom these days.
Oh my God! It's Michael. It's the king of mushrooms.
All right, it's the king of mushrooms this week, whatever. Why is it the king of what's the big deal with chaga? I mean, I hear all over the place, chaga's amazing, chaga this, chaga that. What's the big noise about this?
It's the flavor of the month, and there's a lot of what I would call touts and internet marketers that have called it the king of mushrooms, and it can cure anything. It's a
Mm.
panacea. And and look, in my career, I this is the fourth king of mushrooms that I'm aware of. My son and I, Sky and I, are going, okay, look, let's start calling lion's mane the king of mushrooms, and we'll depose this chaga king.
Corner the market.
It's you know what? No, it's chaga's being way overhyped. It's not a panacea.
Well, I don't think there are any panaceas. I mean, there's things that are helpful.
You know what? There are adaptogens, which I like the term. It's kind of cool and it's non-specific, but chaga is not what I would call an adaptogen for one. It was used traditionally for stomach
Hmm.
conditions, and it's also considered a folk remedy for cancer.
Hmm.
But they're claiming so many things, and you know what? It's just this is what happens when something new hits the market and people are rushing in and competing like crazy for the market. They have to make up wild claims and they use a lot of hyperbole.
Yeah. So you mentioned another mushroom here, lion's mane.
Mm,
Mm, yeah.
indeed.
Which is another one that I've heard a lot about lately.
Well, the cool thing about lion's mane is there's some actual clinical trials out there with lion's mane, and the clinical trials they've done in Japan, which does pretty good work. Japanese scientists, clinical trials with elderly people, 70 years old. They had a control group and and the people who took it, 30 people in each group, and gave them a battery of tests. They gave them 3 grams, only three
Mhm.
grams. It's really interesting. 3 grams of just ground up mushroom for 90 days, tested them again. The group that took the lion's mane tested much better than the
In
control
terms
group.
of cognition. Mhm.
Yes, after 30 days when they stopped taking it, they tested both groups again and they dropped down to normal, both the same, which was kind of interesting. But there is a lot of research out there that shows that lion's mane stimulates what's called nerve growth factor. So nerve growth factor is something that helps maintain neurons and helps, you know, regenerate neurons and as we grow older, our neurologically we start to degrade a little bit. So that's really the thing. And the big one of the big categories out there and what's called nootropics.
Mhm. Smart drugs.
Nootropics is, sort of like anything that enhances your abilities, whether it be cognitive or physical. If it enhances it, it's like I considered coffee a nootropic. Boom. Oh, yeah, I'm alert now.
It's my favorite nootropic.
Lion's mane, because of that, has just gained a tremendous amount of. It's our number one selling mushroom right now.
Mhm.
And so it's just like everybody and his brother wants lion's mane, and who knows, with the baby boom generation of which I'm a part of, as we carry on and I go, what'd you say your name again was? I forget. What was that word I was just thinking of? Um, we are probably going to be grasping for anything
Sure.
that can help us cognitively. And they've even used this lion's mane for dementia in a clinical trial, and it seemed to help. And that's the other thing right now that is really a lot of research going into is dementia.
Oh, well, like you say, baby boomers, a bunch of us, for one, and, I mean, science just keeps moving forward, and people are living longer, so we've got a chance to get dementia, whereas before we wouldn't even have the opportunity.
My mother right now is 94, and I'm just thinking, wow, well, that's kind of cool. As long as I can still be walking and talking, and I don't want to be 94 in bed
No, no, of course
somewhere,
not.
can't get up, and they're feeding me. No, thank you. But if I can maintain myself in a healthier way, then yeah, I don't mind living a little longer, but I don't want to live longer and not be in that type of condition, right?
Of course. Well, more time the question I always ask is more time of what?
Yeah.
Do you have any mushrooms that you personally like to take on a regular basis for your well-being or cognitive function or just because it makes you feel good? You're up there in psilocybin land, I know that.
Well, it's interesting. Psilocybin's getting a lot of
Yes,
play
it
these days
is.
for its use in whether it be a mental illness or use in addiction therapies. I mean, it's wonderful. I'm really happy that they're starting to loosen up on that. I hope it continues. I mean, I didn't think that pot would ever be legalized. I thought that they'd keep people outlaws forever, but
Apparently not.
I'm kind of shocked
Yeah.
there. And now, so it's a great trend. I use reishi in the morning in my
Mhm.
coffee. I put a nice kind of almost a teaspoon of reishi in my coffee. I drink my coffee black. Reishi's nice and bitter. It just gives it another bitter note to it. Overall, for any one mushroom, I just think reishi's the one. It's got the triterpenoids as well as it's one of the highest in beta glucans, and that's one of the things that we found in our beta glucan testing was that the two very highest, way in front of all the others, was reishi and turkey tail.
Mhm. And, well, turkey tail, I mean, we could probably do a whole show on turkey tail with it's got so much with anti-cancer and
Oh yeah, I mean, there's like, yeah, this is just going to be a continuing conversation, Michael.
yeah, well, good, then we'll just come back and we'll do it again. Jeff, anything else to add before we, wind it down for today?
Well, only in the sense that, and what I was going to say about what mushroom do I take? I eat
Mhm.
mushrooms. Michael, there's always fresh mushrooms in my fridge, and here, I mean, I like agaricus. I still like the button mushrooms. I grew it on a big commercial farm for 10 years. I worked on that farm. I ate tons of them there because I could get them for free, but I still like that mushroom. A lot of people like, yeah, yeah. I get fresh shiitake here,
Oh,
which
those are
is I
those
love
are
shiitake
crazy good.
mushroom. And if you're in an area where you can get more than that, like I love a gnocchi too. A gnocchi's fabulous. You know, a gnocchi's like it's got 1,000 little mushrooms with a long white stem and a little tiny cap on it. And it
Oh,
comes in a
yeah, my
bundle.
wife gets those when she makes Chinese hot pot. It's a big
Chinese hot pot. What are you talking about? I was just having that 5 days ago.
All right, my friend. Well, I always enjoy our conversations. I look forward to the next one. Thank you so much for sharing your excitement with everything you found out in China on this last trip.
It's been my pleasure, Michael. Nice to talk to you.
Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Geological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Geological.